Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, one of the most wonderful things about technology is that as I am sitting home nursing a sore throat, I can still teach a lesson through this wonderful PlayPosit program. So, your substitute teacher today should have told you that you have a PlayPosit tonight. I put it in the notes, so hopefully that went okay. The last thing, and excuse me if I cough or clear my throat during this. Uh, so the last type of verbal that we need to talk about is an infinitive. Infinitives are probably the easiest of the verbal to identify, just by itself, to identify an infinitive or an infinitive phrase in a sentence. The problem with infinitives is that they can act as multiple parts of speech. So they're easy to find, but it's not so easy to figure out what they are doing in the sentence because they can act as nouns, adjectives, or adverbs, unlike the other two verbals that we talked about, which only act as one thing. So participles can only be adjectives, and gerunds can only be verbs. The problem with infinitives is that they can be three parts of speech. So that's what makes them difficult. Not so much identifying them in the sentence, but identifying what function they are. And further, if they are adjectives or adverbs, being able to identify what they modify, and if they are nouns, being able to tell me what kind of noun they are in a sentence. So infinitives in general tend to be the hardest verbal, not because they're difficult to find like participles are, but because of the ability of them to be multiple parts of speech. So if we take a look at the rules, they center around to plus the verb. So I put it over here. So we take to and add it to the base form of the verb, and that in of itself makes the infinitive. So the verb is naked, meaning that it has no endings. Basically, that means it's the base form of the verb. So examples are to go, to sit, to talk. The example I provided is that famous line from Hamlet, to be or not to be, that is the question. So in this particular instance, what would the infinitive be for my example? So correct, you should have stated that both to be's are infinitives in this particular instance. So let's take a minute and let's just find the infinitives. So sentence number one, obviously the infinitive is to go. Sentence number two, there is no infinitive, and that's what this note was saying up here. To is also a preposition, so we need to be careful with that because it could be used as a preposition as well. So just because to is in a sentence, like in here, I went to bed early, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have an infinitive in the sentence. In this one, you have to bed, which obviously bed is a noun, so you have a prepositional phrase. Your cat ate too much food today. To, in this instance, isn't even spelled correctly. It is TOO, which indicates that it is an adverb. Looking down here, to sleep all day is unhealthy. You do have an infinitive in that. It is to sleep. And I want to ask you a question. To ask is your infinitive in that sentence. So like most other phrases, an infinitive phrase is made up of everything that modifies that infinitive phrase. So, all right, I want you to pay attention to the Word document for now. I just want to go through not only how I would find an infinitive phrase, but also label that infinitive phrase. Just kind of go through the process of how to do that here. So take a look at number one. I went to the pond to fish for bass. So obviously, this particular sentence is doing its best to try to confuse you because it's incorporating a prepositional phrase that begins with to. The prepositional phrase that begins with to is correct. It would be to the pond. So I have to look for to plus the verb. So in this particular instance, I think that to fish is my infinitive. And I do think that I have a phrase here. Who or what am I fishing for? I am fishing for bass. Okay? So I have my infinitive phrase. So the next thing I have to do is figure out whether it's acting as a noun, an adjective, or an adverb. You know, there's a really easy way to figure out if it's a noun. If I can take this out of the sentence and the sentence loses its like meaning, it's probably not a noun. So, you know, nouns are generally speaking very important to the meaning of the sentence, unless they're acting as a positives. They are generally very important to the meaning of the sentence. So if I took it out and I just said, I went to the pond, that sentence still pretty much makes sense. Although the meanings change, the sentence itself makes sense. So I have to assume that it's a modifier. So because I have to assume that it's a modifier, I have to figure out whether it's modifying an adjective or an adverb. Um, it is right next to a noun, pond, so I have to decide if it is indeed identifying or telling me what kind of pond it is or which one of the pond. And I don't think it's answering that question. It's not describing or giving me any information about pond. So I have to ask questions, you know, based off of adverbs. And if I go through my adverb questions, it is answering the question, why. And because it's answering the question why I went, I can assume that this particular phrase is acting as an adverb. Let's do number 2 together. I have to go to the mall before supper. Once again, you have a prepositional phrase that is trying to confuse you. To go is your infinitive. Your infinitive phrase is everything that has to modify to go. So where are you going? To the mall. When are you going to the mall? Before supper. So both of these are adverb phrases modifying the infinitive. So the whole thing is an infinitive phrase. So let's try to figure out if it's a noun or not. If I take it out of the sentence, does it still make sense? I have. Well, no, I don't think it makes sense at all. So it's probably a noun. What kind of noun is it? Well, it's a noun that's coming after an action verb and it's answering the question, who or what do you have to do? So what kind of noun do I have? I have a direct object. To make good grades, one must study. What is the infinitive phrase in the sentence? I apologize for the pausing. It's generally when I'm going into a coughing fit. Um, so to make good grades, there's one big hint that it's probably not a noun. I can take it out of the sentence and it would still make sense. One must study. But generally speaking, if something is separated from the sentence by a comma, it is not necessary to the sentence and it's probably not acting as a noun. So let's highlight that. To make good grades, one must study. What question is it answering? It is answering the question why. So it is probably acting as an adverb because it's telling us why one must study. They must study to make good grades. All right, why don't you take numbers 4 through 6, identify the gerund phrase, and tell me what you think they're acting as in the sentence. So obviously this was a reflective piece, but I hope that you guys got something that kind of looks like this. All right, let's take a look at infinitives as nouns. You know, take a minute to look at this and see how you do. Number 1, to get a car for my birthday is a direct object. Number 2, to get a car for my birthday is a predicate nominative. Number 3, to get a car for my birthday is a subject. And number 4, to get a car for my birthday is an appositive, which we have not studied yet. All right, do the same thing for adjectives. All right, let's take a look at number 1. The movie to see is Avatar. To see by itself is a adjective phrase modifying movie. Which movie is it? It's the movie to see. I missed the road to take to the beach. Which road did you miss? Or I'm sorry, which road was it? It was the road to take to the beach. The place to see moose is Canada. To see moose is modifying place, telling me what place I have. I need a place to keep my book bag. To keep my book bag, once again, is modifying place. Know that, and note that adjective and infinitive phrases will come directly after a noun, and modify it by answering which or what kind. Why don't you do the same for adverbs? So I went to the pond to fish. Why did you go? You went to fish. To get into Harvard, you must study. Why must you study to get into Harvard? I am happy to be here. Why are you happy? This is an adjective. So to be here, so happy. It's modifying happy, the adjective. Same thing with the next sentence. I am sad to see you go. To see you go is modifying sad. Why are you sad? All right, I would go ahead and take a look at this. I will make it bigger for you, but I would definitely, oops, sorry. I would definitely write this down. My bad. Once again, I'm trying to make this as big as I can. So these are what some of the patterns will look like here. Then you can pause the video and take these or rewind it. But I would definitely note all of these things. And that's our subject over infinitives. You'll have work to do over this tomorrow, which I will also not be here because when you have the flu, you got to take a minimum of 2 days off. So hopefully this made sense. If not, I would really suggest kind of looking online, or you can always, I guess, um, you know, I'd probably say just look online. And if that doesn't work, then just talk to me on Thursday when I'm back at school.